officially begin the program. Thank you. We know PowerPoint China I send it. We be able to do. But we need to take this one off.
I don't know whether.
Fred can.
Let me see if I can see one.
Yeah. So now when you freeze so that the slides can. Uh,
Oh,
shall we rise? Okay, Abba. I thought it was open.
so wait, should we close it now when she's down?
Oh, I think it's fine. Because nobody's going to do anything there.
So nobody will talk before she's down.
Oh, they'll talk.
But should we catch the scriptures?
Okay, then you close it. When she's coming to give the talk.
Then you start with the yeah.
Yeah.
So there's the guest before.
Yeah.
So it's open. Sure. Yes. Sure. Just invite it to say. These two.
Shall we be seated? A very warm welcome to everyone to today's lecture, which is the fifth Anton Wilhelm lecture. We are very privileged and very glad that you're all here to listen to the first time we have a female guest lecturer. So that is quite significant for us since we started the AMO lectures 4 or 5 years ago. So we are very privileged today to be honored with the presence of the Provost of the College of Humanities. We have the Deputy Ambassador for the German Embassy. We have the Dean of Graduate Studies. We have the Director of the Institute of African Studies. So we are very honored to have all these dignitaries with our guest speaker today. To do the welcome address and the opening remarks, will be our chairperson, who is the Provost of the College of Humanities. But before then, I would ask the Director of MIASA to give us the welcome address. Professor Grace Diaba to give us the opening and welcome remarks, and then we'll take the remarks from the chair.
The chair, Provost of the College of Humanities, our guest of honor, who is the Deputy German Ambassador to Ghana, members of the University of Ghana senior management who are here, our distinguished speaker, deans, directors, and heads of units who are here this afternoon, MIASA fellows, invited guests, colleagues, students, friends from the media, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I didn't get the response. Good afternoon. Thank you. So on behalf of the Marian Institute for Advanced Studies in Africa, MIASA, and its collaborators, that's the Institute of African Studies, the Department of Philosophy and Classics, I would like to welcome all of you who are here with us this afternoon, including those who are also joining us online. I would like to welcome you all to the 5th Anton Wilhelm lecture. For the past 5 years, we have organized this lecture which continues to provide an important platform for rigorous reflection on knowledge production. And we are happy that today we have one of UG's distinguished scholars to deliver this year's lecture. The lecture, as most of you know already, is named after one of the earliest African philosophers, Anton Wilhelm. Born in the early 18th century in what is today Ghana's western region, Amu was taken to Europe as a child, educated in law and philosophy, and went on to become the first philosopher of African origin to lecture at German universities. His eventual return to the then Gold Coast reminds us that African thinkers have long moved across intellectual worlds, shaping and being shaped by knowledge traditions that extend across regions and continents. As an institute founded on a collaboration between the University of Ghana and German partner institutions, MIASA is particularly proud to host the Amu Lecture as a flagship intellectual event at the University of Ghana, a reflection of the strong relationship between Ghana and Germany. And I'm sure you would all agree with me that the presence of the Deputy Ambassador here is also evidence of the strong relationship between Ghana and Germany. It is also a reflection of MIASA's role as a shared intellectual space where scholars from both contexts and beyond engage in sustained dialogue, collaboration, and mutual learning. The lecture series therefore speaks directly to our commitment to decentering knowledge production, foregrounding African intellectual traditions, and creating spaces where African scholarship engages the world on its own terms. The theme of this year's lecture, Where are the Therapeutic Intellectuals? Popular Culture and Autobiographical Narratives for Justice and Healing, directs our attention to forms of knowledge that are often overlooked in dominant academic traditions. It foregrounds African voices, lived experiences, and creative expressions as important sites of intellectual work. This focus aligns closely with MIASA's commitment to decentering knowledge production and making African perspectives more visible and audible, as I've already indicated. We are therefore honored to have Professor Akosia Adumakwampofu deliver this year's lecture. Her scholarship exemplifies the very kind of engaged, reflexive, and socially responsive intellectual practice that this lecture series also seeks to celebrate. As I conclude, let me express my sincere appreciation to the organizing team for the dedication, and to our partners, our long-term partners, the Institute of African Studies, and then the Department of Philosophy and Classics for your continued collaboration for the past 5 years. We would also like to appreciate our funders, the German Federal Ministry of Research, Technology and Space, and the University of Ghana for their financial support. We are grateful to the Provost of the College of Humanities, who has also been a very strong supporter of MIASA, for your continued support and direction. And of course, also to the Vice Chancellor and to senior management for their support. I would like also to thank the German Embassy in Accra, and especially to the Deputy Ambassador, Ms. Sivine Jansen, for also being a strong supporter of MIASA. Finally, we would like to thank our distinguished speaker, Professor Akosia Adumakwampofu, for agreeing to share her insights with us this afternoon. I wish all of us a very stimulating lecture. Once again, Akwaba, willkommen, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Grace Liaba, for giving us the opening remarks. Our chairperson for today's lecture is the Provost of the College of Humanities, who is also a Professor of Geography. Shall we welcome Professor Joseph Yarrow to give his remarks, sorry.
So I would also greet you and expect a response. So good afternoon and welcome to the University of Ghana. This is the Vice Chancellor's greeting, so it has some power. And I'm happy to be in her shoes this afternoon to welcome all of you here. Madam Speaker, the Deputy Ambassador of Germany to Ghana, Directors of MIASA, Dean Graduate School, former Vice Chancellor, our distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is my pleasure to chair the 5th Anton Wilhelm lecture that is organized by MIASA in collaboration with the Institute of African Studies and the Department of Philosophy and Classics, all under the College of Humanities. It is an honor to welcome you all to this important intellectual engagement on behalf of the Vice Chancellor of the University of Ghana, Professor Nanaba Amfo. Today's lecture, captured under the theme, "Where are the therapeutic intellectuals? Popular culture and autobiographical narratives for justice and healing." This takes place at a time when our world, and indeed our continent, is experiencing profound turbulence. Many young people are navigating despair as a result of economic uncertainty, social fragmentation, precarity, and shrinking spaces for free expression. Yet, as the abstract for this lecture so powerfully reminds us, Africans and people of African descent have long cultivated the ability to survive and make meaning through adversity. From slavery and colonialism to the enduring inequalities of our contemporary global order, we have drawn on deep reservoirs of resilience, reciprocity, and communal ethics. This lecture therefore invites us to reflect on these inheritances, whilst also acknowledging the critical truth: the responsibility of envisioning a more hopeful, just, and humane future cannot be delegated to the next generation alone. It is work we are called to undertake with them in solidarity and humility. The tensions between the academy and the aspiration of young people, whether frustrations around exclusivity, academic classism, and a perceived detachment from present social values, call on us to re-examine how we teach, research, lead, supervise, and serve. Young academics want institutions that are genuinely responsible to the crisis of our era, such as climate change, displacement, war, inequality, digital harms, gender-based violence, migration, and the erosion of academic freedom. They also want universities that take social responsibility seriously. These concerns resonate strongly with the University of Ghana's strategic priorities. Our commitment to research excellence is grounded in societal relevance. Our investments in student experience aim to ensure that every learner feels seen, supported, and empowered. Our pursuit of internationalization is anchored in equitable partnerships and to produce globally engaged, locally impactful scholarship. And our governance reforms, innovation agenda, and community outreach express our belief that universities must contribute meaningfully to the national development, continental transformation, and global problem solving. The philosophical provocation of today's lecture, which echoes some of Amos' assertions, is timely. It challenges us to interrogate whether our institutions merely exist or whether they are truly alive, responsive, ethical, creative, and committed to serving the public good. It also invites us to consider how older intellectual traditions and emerging philosophies including those found in contemporary popular culture, might work together to shape new visions of purpose and collective well-being. As we continue to build a university that is relevant to its society, confident in its identity, and committed to excellence, gatherings such as this offer us valuable spaces for reflection, dialogue, and reimagination are important. I'm therefore grateful to the organizers, MIASA, Institute of African Studies, Department of Philosophy and Classics, for creating such a space for dialogue. A special thanks to the speaker, Professor Akosua Ampo, for agreeing to deliver this important lecture, as you have always done when you are called upon by any of our units in the college. I hope it will inspire us. Unfortunately, the students are not here. A great loss, but we have this recorded. It will inspire the students, scholars around, administrators, and members of the public alike to think boldly and to act collaboratively. I look forward to your active participation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Chair, who is the Provost of the College of Humanities. As I mentioned earlier, that we have a special guest of honor in our midst, in the person of the Deputy German Ambassador to Ghana, Ms. Sylvain Jansen. So we'll invite our guest of honor to give her remarks as well, and then we'll take the lecture. Shall we give a round of applause to
Good afternoon, everybody. Pleasure as always for me to be here at this esteemed university and at MIASA. Provost, co-directors of MIASA, Professor Ampofo, distinguished faculty and fellows, honored guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure and an honor to also from my side welcome you to the 5th Anton Wilhelm Amo lecture hosted by Maria Sibylla Meren Institute for Advanced Studies in Africa. I thank MIASA and also the University of Ghana for sustaining this important platform for critical reflection and intellectual exchange. The lecture series, Anton Wilhelm Amo, the lecture series namesake, Anton Wilhelm Amo, remains a powerful symbol of the long and also complex intellectual entanglements between Africa and Europe. Anton Amo challenged the dominant assumptions of his time and insisted on the full humanity and intellectual agency of those who were excluded from it. It is until today not entirely clear how he made his way to Europe, but what is clear that he made an astonishing career and became the first professor in Europe of African descent. And in the honor of this legacy, in Berlin just this year, a street was renamed, a street with not the let's say, best reputable name when it came to African history in Germany, to Anton Wilhelm Amo Street, actually right next to my ministry, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And also when the federal president of Germany, Frank-Walter Steinmeier, came to Ghana in the beginning of November, he very clearly lauded the heritage of Anton Wilhelm Amo and what his heritage still means for German-Ghanaian relationship today. Honoring those who intellectually challenge the status quo, and also that knowledge and intellect can bring you far in life. So his legacy continues to invite us to ask who is heard and whose knowledge counts, and what responsibility intellectuals also carry in society. This is also a question that lies at the heart of today's lecture. Where are the therapeutic intellectuals? At a time of social division, political tension, and multiple overlapping crises, this topic resonates far beyond academia. Actually, also very personally with me, the amount of crises I'm handling at the moment in the office, I definitely need some therapeutic intellectual assessment of this. The topic challenges scholars not only to analyze and critique, but also to engage, to listen, to translate, and where possible to contribute to social understanding and healing across the many divides we see. I'm therefore honored that Professor Akosua Dumako Ampofu will deliver this year's lecture, as she's a leading scholar, also bridging Germany and Ghana, and a public intellectual whose work exemplifies engaged scholarship, combining analysis with social relevance and academic excellence with ethical commitment. Allow me to say a word about Germany's support for MIASA. The German government, through the Federal Ministry of Education and Research, supports MIASA as part of the Global Marian Institute network, because we believe that excellent research thrives through international partnership on eye level, through intellectual diversity and mutual respect. MIASA represents a model of long-term, equitable academic cooperation, one that strengthens African scholarship, fosters global dialogue, and contributes to addressing shared global challenges from multiple perspectives. Actually, me myself, I'm quite regularly at MIASA, also with high-ranking guests from Germany. Last one, former President Christian Wulff, also to exchange about topics that keep me on the top of my heels in my daily work at the German embassy, also with reference to shared colonial heritage that Germany and Ghana have in parts of this country, and how to best address these lingering challenges from the past to bring them into current healing and into a shared future, where both can look more positively at the things that bind us together. Ladies and gentlemen, the Anton Wilhelm Amo lecture is meant to provoke reflection and to also open dialogue, and I'm confident that today's lecture will do exactly that. I'm looking forward to the discussion, and I all thank you very much for being here.
Thank you very much. Now we're coming to the lecture itself, which will be delivered by Emerita Professor Akosua Dumako Ampofu. We're now about to introduce the lecturer to us. To do that is the co-director of MIASA, Professor Mamadou Diawara, to introduce our keynote speaker for today.
Good evening. This is the Vice President of the University of Ghana. This is Vice Ambassador of Germany, Mr. Provost. Dear audience, all protocol reserved, all protocol observed. What a day. It's a privilege and honor to have been invited to introduce Professor Akosua Dumako Ampofu. It's a commonplace and simple to introduce a colleague, but how can you fairly introduce a friend, a sister, is a problem. It's challenging and even daunting. When you know more, that the more you dig into a resume, the more excited you get. Akosua Dumako Ampofu is Professor of African and Gender Studies at the Institute of African Studies at the University of Ghana, UG. Dumako Ampofu is President of African Studies Association of Africa and Honorary Professor at the Center of African Studies, University of Birmingham, England, and a Fellow at the Ghana Academy of Art and Sciences. She is the immediate past dean and international programs at the University of Ghana and was the foundation director of the university's Center for Gender Studies and Advocacy, 2005-2009, and from 2010 to 15, she was director of the Institute for African Studies. She is Doctor of Philosophy in Sociology, PhD, Vanderbilt University of Nashville, Tennessee. She founded this on a solid training ground a Master of Science in Development and Planning and Management at the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology in Kumasi, a postgraduate diploma in Regional and Special Planning at the University of Dortmund, and Bachelor of Science in Architecture and Design. She is a perfect multitasker and a genuine model of young people who want to be trained to be ready for the challenges of the future. As Chisomo Kalinga notes in the journal Africa, I quote, "African researchers have been speaking up, but our researchers from Europe, North America, etc., and all over protagonists who claim to be interested in Afrofuturism, in Afro-rising, are they listening at all?" This was the question posed by Chisomo Kalinga. And Professor Adamoko Ampofo eloquently answered, I quote, "Crying, even yelling, can be important. They have their role, but both cathartic and as a catalyst to force fact building." End of quotation. How, and this is from you again, how to informalize the formal? Or I can weep but not wail. These are striking formulas which leave a lasting impression on social science humanities to core. Professor Adamako Ampofo considers herself to be an activist scholar. Don't tell us, we know. You are an intellectual public. Her areas of interest include African knowledge systems, higher educations, race and identity politics, gender relations, masculinities, and popular culture. She is currently working on a whole range of projects. Let me call a couple of them. In her work on Black masculinities, she explores the shifting nature of identities among men in Africa and in the diaspora. Another project entitled An Archive of Activism, Gender and Public History in Post-Colonial Ghana, she seeks to constitute a publicly accessible archive of and documentary on gender activism and political women in post-colonial Ghana with her colleague Skinner from the University of Birmingham. Professor Adamako Ampofo's recent publications include Producing Inclusive Feminism, Knowledge, Post-Colonialities and Discourse in the Global South, or Young African Men's Reflections on Negotiating Sexual Intimacy, etc., etc. Adamako Ampofo is editor-in-chief of Contemporary Journal of African Studies. She serves on the board of several organizations, including the U.S. African Studies Association, the Center for the Advancement of Scholarship, University of Pretoria, Africa Multiple Cluster of Excellence in Bayreuth, of which she is the chairperson, Institute for Humanities in Africa, HUMA, University of Cape Town in South Africa. She received a whole range of distinctions. Let me quote the Junior Fulbright Scholar, a New Century Fulbright Scholar, and a Senior Scholar Fulbright in Residence. In 2010, she was awarded the Feminist Award, Activism Award by Sociologists for Women and Society, SWS. I could talk until tomorrow, as Karin Barber once wrote, This is not my day. This is yours. Dear sister, what is yours? Please.
Thank you very much. We'll have a separate word to usher in our guest lecturer.
Asmamio, Wabinfue, the Assembly Samano said, Manamajo Tata. Answer Mama to us one more. The Assida, Mama Chandian Poyamio. The Nation in the Bamba. I feel so quite very sir. Mamma, fishy a power. Open way. No more quabba. I feel a condone and intima, Masham. But when you're not quabba, some woman fishy a padium. Dintia Shamu Eninanim Sentia Wa and Quatobramunwo Abadumabia 1 year bonnet. There's no qualm on it. The eye of the Frano Anton Wilhelm. Amon, and I have friend could read, Yami and Abum. I'm a baby Kunini or a professor. I dear my Hua, Fapan and said, or my nigger and Finny Crum. Or Saba or Memo, Bay dear here. We are someone so, and if I be a no say, yeah, you know, and if I miss come fire, come from home. Tiabli be a shampoo kind of. And only I give you one say, what been for a cause out at my corn puffle. But that's ya, what you are from one and all dear or Sefata said. Obey a bedroom Cassachana. I could say, Ghana. I could say, oh my Ghana, 8 years. I am going to Franciano Potutu. Obaco could do for a solid giant. Said the Abaya, my baby. I couldn't hear anything a Maya boy or can't be. About pay. About one draw. Yes, I'm tossing a moon. A black slow. I could say, Casso, and a blood blue. So, Casso, and a blood blue. So, Oba pay. A blood blue. So.
Just next.
Good afternoon, everyone. Osei Crunchy Wahin, Osei Wahin. Osei, Medasi Bibre, you know what? And you ma watu ama Medasi Bibre, Nyami Shell. Osei Kranche, by the way, as a griot, was part of one of our popular culture projects from many years ago, and it might interest people to know that his daughter also now is a griot and plays the seprewa. I'd like to acknowledge Niasa. I'm going to follow my brother Mamadou and say all protocols here and there observed. I'm very grateful to everyone in the room and those online. I would like to say a special thank you to Grace, Agnes, and Mamadou and all their team from Niasa for the consistent communications and support towards the preparation of this lecture. Mamadou went and fished up a very long biography. There's one correction I have to make because the treasurer of the African Studies Association is here, and she knows very well that I am no longer the president. And I would hate to go and be reported as having presented myself as such. So I no longer am the president of the African Studies Association. I also want to thank the many young people who have supported me and my work over the last 35 years plus as a scholar academic in this university. I think I owe a lot of my co-creation and my career's successes to them and to my engagement with them, and that they in turn have also allowed me to guide them. So Amu, today we are here to bring Amu into our conversation. In the last decade or so, and certainly in the last 5 years, Anton Wilhelm Amu has been enjoying a rediscovery, and that's an interest in his work as well as his person. Stephen Pepra, a Ghanaian postdoctoral fellow in the Departments of Classics and Philosophy at the University of Toronto, says that he first heard about Amu in 2012 when he was an undergraduate philosophy student at this university, and a professor mentioned him in passing in a seminar. That passing comment was, however, enough to pique Pepra's interest, and after he graduated from the University of Ghana, his deep interest in Amu's work led him to the University of Cambridge, where he earned a master's degree in ancient philosophy and Latin, and began the work of translating Amu's works from Latin into English and espousing his philosophical ideas, or as he puts it, oh, Pepra is in the audience. I've never met him. I look forward. Wow. Okay, great. I look forward to speaking with you. So he's been translating his works into English. I read online, and I'm quoting him for the Ghanaian intellectual community. In 2020, Oxford University Press published an English translation of Amu's Latin works from the early 1730s, and I understand that Pepra is doing some corrections to those translations. These are some of the catalysts that have spawned conferences, lecture series, books and theses, and institutional artifacts constructed and curated in Amu's honor. The invisibilizing, academics must use big words, so even the erasure, one would say, of Amu and his work in his lifetime, and the resuscitation of his work and person about 260 years after his death, can be read as a metaphor for what the Kenyan academic and leading figure in African literature, Ngugi wa Thiong'o, who joined the ancestors in May of this year, has referred to as the deletion of the hard drive of African knowledge from the minds of Africans and the downloading into it of the Eurocentric worldview. For too long, the modern academy taught Africans to believe that we had no history, no heroes, no inventions, no science, no arts, or that what we had was inferior to what Europeans had to offer. Much has been said about Amu's contributions as a scholar, specifically as a philosopher and an ethicist, and his works as well as his biography, albeit the limited version available to us, have been invoked for intellectual, ideological, and activist projects on migration, inter- and multiculturalism, anti-racism, reflections on African philosophical writing, Afro-German history and identity, the rewriting of Black history in Germany and Austria, and clearly carried with him and infused his work with Nzema Akan understandings of shared community well-being. One of my former vice chancellors is here, and I'm very honored, Professor Adai Mensah. I can decide to say that you are Amu's ancestor. So today, if I misspeak, please, afterwards. Today, my intention is to turn the lens on his identity as this Nzema Akan intellectual. And I invoke the spirit of Anton, Wilhelm Amu, and other Akan philosophers to exhort us to reimagine the academy in a time of great uncertainty, precarity, especially for young people, and onslaughts on academic freedom that can deeply impact authentic knowledge production and solidarity. I'm not a philosopher, I'm a social scientist. Over lunch, the philosophers were having a debate, and I was in the middle there. And I dare say that some of them have much deeper appreciation of Amu's philosophical writings than I do. I say seen and acknowledged, and which portions of Amu have been seen and acknowledged. Lectures have been organized annually since 2013 at the Martin Luther University in Halle-Wittenberg, at Southwestern University in Texas, at the University of Basel, among others. In 2009, a two-day symposium on Amu was held in the Institute of African Studies, my own academic home, in this university, in cooperation with the Goethe Institute. And today's lecture is the fifth iteration in honor of a Black African intellectual under the auspices of MIASA. Here are some other distinctions bestowed on Anton Wilhelm Amu. On the 10th of October 2020, Google celebrated Amu with a Google Doodle designed by Berlin-based Nigerian-Italian artist Diana Ajeta. Note, most Google Doodles are of white men. No surprise there. As you travel with me today, I will take occasional side steps to share some fun facts with you. So let's take our first side step on Google Doodles, just so we know a little bit more about them. Scientists say that doodling can help you remember what you hear, help you focus. Doodling can help your brain stay active when you're getting bored. Doodling is a self-therapeutic activity, a simple, accessible, and affordable source of reward for our brains, so please doodle away. Google took this and made it an interesting thing with the Google Doodle. Every year, the Doodle team receives thousands of global ideas from both internal Googlers and the public. Guided by a set of Doodle principles, a committee of Googlers gather annually over the course of several months to determine which topics they will take. And I just want to share a few snippets on some who have been doodled. Here are 5 public Black intellectuals. On the 11th of April 2014, it would have been the 15th birthday of Percy Lavon Julian, pioneering chemist who overcame the obstacles of segregation to ascend to international fame. Julian died in 1975 and was born in Montgomery, Alabama. His claim to fame is that he synthesized chemicals from plants to make medicine, which included a treatment for glaucoma and other inflammatory illnesses. He's most well known for using soybean for this product. As a Black man, he had few opportunities, but has more than 100 patents and received 19 honorary doctorates. I hope you can figure out who is who in the Doodle slide. On the 4th of April 2018, Doodle celebrated the multi-creative artist, writer, and civil rights activist Maya Angelou, who herself had spent several years on this campus, on what would have been her 90th birthday. And they were set to music. They set to music her poem, Still I Rise. And so when you played it on that day, you heard her. On the 1st of September 2020, the work of Charlotte Christensen, a Dublin-based guest artist, depicted Jamaican-born British doctor and racial equality campaigner Dr. Harold Moody for his doodle, marking the day Moody arrived in the UK from Jamaica in 1905, 16 years later. He became the founder of the Black Civil Rights Movement in the UK. On the 8th of February 2023, in honor of Black History Month in the USA, Google Doodle celebrated Haitian American model and disability rights advocate Mama Cox. Illustrated by Brooklyn-based guest artist Lynn Lucien, Mama Cox is best known for shattering expectations around beauty. The model and advocate proudly strutted down catwalks on her prosthetic leg, often designed with colors and patterns. On that day in 2019, Mama Cox was also carried out her debut on a runway at the New York Fashion Week. On the 1st of February 2024, in honor of Black History Month again, Doodle celebrated civil rights activist and writer James Baldwin, who was illustrated by New York City-based guest artist John Kay. With his pen, Baldwin wrote honestly about personal and societal struggles of his time, clearly a therapeutic intellectual, including race, class, and sexuality. My final doodle on your slide. On April 27, 2025, Doodle celebrated 31 years since South Africa held its first ever democratic elections after years of racial segregation under apartheid. More than 19 million South African citizens of all races cast their ballots over a 4-day voting period. Freedom Day reminds South Africans and us all of the sacrifices made to achieve emancipation and honors the individuals who championed freedom, human rights, and democracy, including, of course, South Africa's first Black president, Nelson Mandela. Returning to Amu, in 2021, when the maiden Miasa lecture was held here at the University of Ghana, a plaque honoring him was also unveiled at the Department of Philosophy, the picture you see on the bottom of the slide. And in 2022, the square in front of the Labor Court in Stuttgart's West End, hitherto known locally as Lerchenplätzle, was renamed Anton Wilhelm Amu Square. The organizers' intention was to send a message against racism by honoring a Black philosopher. A panel discussion was held that day and included, among others, Andrea Vicky Amankwa-Abrago, who described herself as a Boga, born in Hamburg to Ghanaian trans-migrants, and who founded the Anton Wilhelm Amu Erbschaft. In August 2025, after a 5-year legal battle in the context of the, quote, decolonization movement that included the push to remove place names perceived to have racist origins, officials in Berlin finally accepted the proposal we heard from our Deputy Ambassador to rename Mohrenstraße, Moore Street, to Anton Wilhelm Amu Street, and you see that also on your screen. This was not a recent struggle. While many of the 2025 activists pushing for the name change were in their 20s and 30s, the struggle for the recognition of Black people in Germany has been going on for a very long time, and this particular victory was the culmination of over 20 years of activism. Take a second sidestep with me. The 2 young men you see in the photo under the title of Amu Street include 2 of my intellectual children, Sabelo Nchezeba and Kwesi Akins, both part of the renaming and larger decolonial movements. Kwesi was my master's student here at the University of Ghana and our first intern at the Center for Gender Studies and Advocacy in the year 2005-2006. In 2023-2024, when I was the Wangari Maathai visiting professor at the University of Kassel, this was partly because of Kwesi having introduced me to the Global Partnership Network in Development at the University of Kassel. Sabelo has worked with me around issues of masculinity and knowledge production. I share this to show that struggles often have a long durée and also include young people working together with their elders. For all the revival and remembering of Amu and selected Black intellectuals, the history of philosophy and other disciplines remains predominantly white, Western, and male. Hegel's life and work, for example, are represented in the Hegel House Museum in Stuttgart. However, there's no Amu House in Germany, as far as I know. What memory is bestowed on Anton Wilhelm Amu? For the rest of my reflections this evening, I would like to, there's supposed to be a picture here and it's gone, so I'm slightly confused at the moment. Anyway, we'll be reimagining and imagining Amu, the therapeutic intellectual, and I invite you to imagine and remember Amu as an intellectual who was therapeutic, who was also an academic, and whose work and practice sought to engender wholeness and justice. We'll look at today's academy and our role as academics in times of youth precarity, Because as academics, our role really is a very privileged one, and our work must count for something. And then I'll make some suggestions on popular culture for healing work in the academy. And here I invite you to enter into some of my own experiences and strategies. In this slide are pictures of from two of Amu's works. On the left is an entry for Anton Wilhelm Amu's master's degree dated October 17th, 1730 from the University of Wittenberg. And on the right is the title page of his 1734 second doctoral dissertation on the apathy of the human mind. Please join me as we take an imaginary walk back in time. Please, the historians and the people from Nzema will forgive me for my creative license here. The year is around 1703, and a precocious little boy of 4 or 5 is running to the beach where his father, Kwame Amu, and a troop of men have just returned from a fishing expedition. Let's say the younger Amu is the third child and second son to Kwame Amu and Yaba Akesi. Yaba is a trader in smoked fish that she carries to Kumasi in exchange for ivory and leather from Salaga traders, items well sought after for rituals in the king's palace. Young Amu's uncle, Nana Kamla, is a goldsmith. Kwame Amu, the younger Amu's father, swoops the young lad in his arms, drapes him across his shoulders, before setting him down and asking him to go inform Yaba Akesi that the men are back and that he should be home for the evening meal shortly. Young Amu takes a detour past his uncle's shop on his way home. It is not hard to imagine that the young lad is captivated by the scent of the glowing metal, the glow from the fire itself, and the sound of the pounding anvil as Nana Kamla and his apprentices hammered away at beautiful jewelry for the king. Nana also always had amazing stories about the Nzema people's history and principles of morality, prudence, and wisdom that were built into the mutuality of community. Benkum dwari nifa, nifa dwari benkum. The left hand washes the right, and the right washes the left. Nana explains to Amu, as he depicts hands washing each other, and that you become a human person, a nipa, as you contribute to the family and the larger community's well-being. Young Amu had once asked Nana Kamla whether the strangers from Asante were also family. The wise goldsmith replied that in the human flesh, there is no edge of cultivation, there is no boundary. And he would always conclude by exhorting the lad to be of moral courage, and that all things were possible, giving the omnipotence of God, Jinyame, except God, meaning that everything is possible, or God is sovereign. Suddenly, a loud rustling noise breaks into young Amu's reverie, and what feels like 100 fearful-looking men rush out from the bushes and capture him. No one hears the lad's screams. The so-called trade fort that later became a seat for the deportation of enslaved people, Fort Apollonia, had not yet been built by the British, but the Swedes had already established a trading post in 1655, and the British later established one in 1691. Young Amu was sent there as precious cargo, a beautiful young boy without blemish. The ensuing story is not very clear. However, eventually Amu is presented to the German Duke Anton Ulrich of Braunschweig-Wolfenbüttel, who was impressed with the lad's intelligence and physical beauty. He incorporated him into his household and gave him a good education. The first several weeks were tortuous for Amu. Although he could feel the affection of his hosts, the food was strange, and his yearning for home was so palpable that sometimes he could not breathe. The sound of Nana Kamla's anvil, Kwame Amu and the fishermen's songs as they returned from the sea, and the rhythmic beat of his mother's yam pounding haunted rather than sweetened his dreams. It took him many years to become accustomed to the pale skin of everyone around him, and to accept that these were not ghosts. Even after 15 years, the winter cold and snow felt strange and forbidding. When his colleagues in school and university taunted his black skin or pretended to playfully ruffle his tight curls, and on occasion waylaid him, beat him up, and asked him to walk on all fours like the monkey that he was, he wondered if they were Nipa persons. The trauma of separation was so deep that unbeknownst to Amu, he held on to his memories of who he was so profoundly that his African self remained embedded in his intellectual consciousness and his work. This is how I have decided to remember Amu. So, the therapeutic intellectual. Today, we live in a world with a widening gap between rich and poor. New and resurgent epidemics. Our provost shared some of these trigger points with us. Climate and environmental disasters, expanded state surveillance, and the securitization of everyday life. An onslaught on academic freedom. Wars on terror, which actually is an oxymoron. The stigmatization and abuse of ethnic, religious, and sexual minorities. The erection of all kinds of borders against foreigners. And overextended family support systems unable to offer sufficient relief. For young people, many live with a chronic sense of precarity and hopelessness, and in the academy, they wonder what it has to offer them. I want to do another sidestep here to share an experience I had at the University of Cape Town. I think it was in 2005, 2006. This is when the Rhodes Must Fall movement was fomenting, and young students were holding what they called Indizos, and I was invited to one where they would talk and plan and strategize. There was a student who explained to me that he was studying commerce, what we would call business administration, because this is what would earn him money rather than the literature that he would have preferred to study. He was the first person from his family to attend the university. However, his experiences of living in the township and his understanding of the way the economy worked and what he was learning in the classroom were at odds with each other. All his attempts to explain to his lecturer that some of what he was learning did not make sense, did not seem to work, and he just adjusted and had to be what Du Bois would have called the double, dividing his personhood into two, one for the classroom and one for his home. Another experience at that same point that I was at UCT was with a master's student. The previous was an undergraduate student who was in a literature class, interestingly enough, and the students had been asked to pick an icon to write about. He took one of the oral He picked one of the oral historians that he was familiar with and asked the lecturer if he could work with this historian. The lecturer indicated that nothing had been written about this person, and so therefore he could not be a source of study. He insisted, and he had his way eventually. There are many young people today who are working actively for change. In recent years, many social movements have been led by young people. In Africa, we can think of the Rhodes Must Fall and Fees Must Fall movements in South Africa. We can think of the End SARS movement in Nigeria. We can think of the Grifana, We Are Fed Up in Arabic movement in Sudan. We can think of the Reject the Finance Bill in Kenya, the Gen Z Mada in Madagascar, in the Fridays for Futures movements in Europe, and also the 2023-2024 movements globally by young people on behalf of the people of Palestine. Many have been arrested, beaten, imprisoned, and even died. On September 5th, 2025, Dian Ruma, a young Indonesian activist, was found dead, hanging from a rafter inside a bamboo hut. He was a climate and environmental activist, aged only 30. How can the intellectual project be relevant for young people's justice work? How do we express solidarity? How do we sustain the trust of our students and younger colleagues as they bring charges of exclusivity, academic classism, and chauvinism against the ivory tower? Many young academics are uncertain whether to reform, break, and rebuild, or discard it completely. The provost said very nice things about this university. As for me, I'm retired, so I'm a go 2 fierce no knife. I will say that he is part of what he shares with us is aspirational, and part of it is what we may still need to, critique. Young people want to see a deeper engagement with the public, especially around topical subjects of immigration, climate and environmental calamities, wars, racism, sexual abuse, cyberbullying, social and economic inequalities, and shrinking academic freedom, to name a few. They also want to see greater social responsibility within our own institutions. How can our intellectual and creative practices contribute to a true expression of human well-being in our academic communities and the envisioning of a hope-filled future? Writing about African decolonial cinema, the Cameroonian filmmaker Bekolo in 2023 emphasizes the therapeutic potential of the arts and popular culture in our intergenerational intellectual work. What African philosophies can be applied to this project and how? Tandika Mkandawere in 2005, defines intellectual work as the labor of the mind and soul, and says intellectuals are persons who play major roles in shaping ideologies, passions, and societal visions. Samia Amin refers to the intellectual's capacity to take positions, shape ideologies and societal visions, and this is a political project. It is not a safe space, and it means that critiques against different powers will always have to happen. The therapeutic intellectual expresses solidarity and builds trust into the community, and to link this to justice work is a big responsibility. Of course, intellectuals cannot single-handedly transform the world, but I don't believe that the world can transform without some decisive help from intellectuals. Our knowledge, again, must count for something. The Akan cosmology of the well-being of the individual within the context of community did not mean it was non-hierarchical or free of competition. If we think of community in the Benkum Dwarinifa sense, that we learn to be human in community, that we cannot fare well as a collective if some are not faring well, then the academy must be a place of mutual recognition, mutual learning, empathy for an interdependence between people, solidarity between the young and the old, the seniors and the juniors, undergirded by recognition of our common humanity. I say again, I am not a philosopher. I have engaged with them, and I believe that philosophers like Apia, Redu, Jechi, Abraham, feminist scholars like feminist theologian Oduyoye, Wangari Maathai, all argue that the realization of one's capacity to develop one's personhood can only occur in the context of living, growing, developing, and flourishing among communities of people, who will, of course, be diverse. They also show the multi-layered dimensions of what Desmond Tutu has popularized as Ubuntu, especially the need to embed in it or to recognize in it both the capacity to reason and for good moral conduct. Ogude and authors of a volume on Ubuntu point to how personhood and agency were always central in the interventions that Black intellectuals made in the face of colonial and post-colonial experiences. These principles have been and can be reinvented to mobilize and engage with questions and the social and political issues of our day and in the academy. Amu the Nzemao African, we know, studied philosophy and law at the University of Halle, was fluent in Latin, Greek, Hebrew, French, Dutch, and German, completed doctoral dissertations at the universities of Halle and Wittenberg, now the Martin Luther University of Halle-Wittenberg, becoming, as we heard, the first African to earn a PhD in philosophy at a European university. And he subsequently taught at German universities and returned to Ghana, we are told, in approximately 1750. Scholars of philosophy are not in agreement as to whether Amu's work was built on or situated in African thought. I have tried to imagine how it might be. After all, he was very young when he was abducted. However, in this imagination, the wounds of trauma can run very deep, and yet those same memories can be retrieved as a shield to preserve one's own identity and nipperness or personhood. In their 2022 paper, Reflections of West African Thought Traditions on the Context of German Enlightenment, Amu as a Cross-Cultural Philosopher, Martin J. and Werner Karl are more specific, and I quote, "Psychological theories of personality and aspects of the philosophy of memory provide a reason for not overlooking Amu's debt to the encyclopedia of knowledge in the form of the traditions, tales, myths, and proverbs that he carried with him from the shores of Axim in Nzema, however rudimentary these may have been at the point of his departure. Unquote. Other noteworthy points are that it was unusual for an African to retain his name in the Europe of the time and that of the 16 known first-generation Africans who served in the Duchy of Braunschweig-Wolfenbüttel between 1650 and 1750. Only one other person also carried his birth name. In his publications on handwritten notes and in university registers, Amu usually added his two baptismal names that were reminiscent of the names of the two dukes who served as his godparents. However, it is notable that he abbreviated them to A.W., Anton, Wilhelm, A.W., at times, while he spelled out Amu at all times. Additionally, he usually qualified his name by additions such as African, from Guinea, from the nation of Africa, from Axim, or a combination of those. Arguably, all these indicate a constant awareness of his origin and belongingness, an awareness that may be taken to reflect concurrence with the contention common to the Akan cultural communities on the West African coast, that a person's name signifies more than an individual's identity, Ejay and Carl argue. More than this, a name encodes one's site of communion with fellow humans and other beings that occupy various locations on a continuum of existence. A name, thus, signifies one's origin or the indelible reference point of one's relationship with physical and metaphysical existence. Amu's core idea in response to Descartes was that the mind doesn't experience sensation, nor is it affected by external stimuli in the same way that the body does. He considered the mind to be a spirit, a non-physical substance distinct from the body, whereas the body, being material, is the source of all perception and feeling. He said, I quote, "To be alive and to exist are not synonymous. Everything that is alive exists, but not everything that exists is alive." This appears to hearken to Akan cosmologies about person. Who is Nipa? These considerations are in line with Wiredu's conjecture that the foundations of Amu's critique of Descartes' assignment of sensation to the concept of spirit or mind may be in residual commitments that he absorbed from his early life in Akan Nzema culture. Similarly to many Africans, intellectuals are not, Amu became an African in exile by using his European philosophical training in this case to examine and affirm the conditions for advancing the cultural courses of Africans. Ejay and Carl also argue that for Amu there could be a high value in the systems of thought and belief of peoples and intellectual cultures beyond Europe and Christianity. We will not go further into that. In the introduction to one of his treatises, Amu refers to the phrase, apart from God. These are the three words in the Latin original that could be translated from the traditional Akan expression and symbol for the extraordinary potency of God. Je nyame, except God, meaning unless God is involved, nothing is possible, or in a positive formulation, only with God is anything possible. The academy that many of us in this room inhabit. Between the beginning of the 18th century and much earlier and today, the contemporary university that we inherited from Europe and we inhabit today, much has happened. But before we walk through these, please, another sidestep with me. I want to remind you that before there were universities in Europe, there were universities in Africa, and I will just want to signal a few of them. The Al-Qarawiyyin University in Fez, Morocco, was founded in 859 AD by Fatima Al-Firi, a Tunisian-born woman, making it the world's oldest higher education institution and the first to be founded by a woman and a Muslim. The Guinness Book of World Records considers this university to be the oldest. The Al-Azhar University was founded in 970 or 972 AD by Fatimid Caliphate as a center of Islamic learning where students studied the Quran and Islamic law along with logic, grammar, rhetoric, and how to calculate the phases of the moon. Today, it is the chief center of Arabic literature and Islamic learning in the world, and it is located in Egypt. Sankore University in Mali, also known as the University of Timbuktu, was founded and endowed in the year 1307 to 1332. Fura Bay College in Sierra Leone is the oldest public university in Africa, founded in 1827 by missionaries to train teachers and evangelists, and is the first Western-style university in Africa. The European university dates back to the 12th century and can be traced to the early intellectual centers in cities like Paris, Bologna, Salerno, Montpellier, Oxford, and Salamanca, typically a result of papal initiatives, but some were formed by teachers and some were formed by cooperatives of students. Their knowledge was organized along two axes: the liberal arts, grammar, rhetoric, logic, arithmetic, music, astronomy, and geometry, and the sacred sciences, which would later be grouped around the concept of theology and would constitute the crowning glory of the liberal arts. A split occurred in the 12th century between a monastic school reserved for future monks and an urban university school open to everyone, both lay and ecclesiastical, which we have inherited. From a social point of view, the early 12th and 13th century university was anything but elitist. The real nerve of the original university was provided by those university students of modest, or at least non-aristocratic status, who were its leaven. During the 14th century, spurred on by economic crisis, the university became more exclusivist, practically limiting itself to students who enjoyed a protector or sufficient income to support themselves. Higher education, as it was originally conceived, had three main objectives: progress in knowledge, good preparation for the observance of a code of social, moral, and religious conduct, and finally, instruction for the performance of qualified professional tasks. Please take another sidestep with me. In Bologna, the university, reclaimed from the commune, had lost its privileges granted by Frederick Barbarossa in 1158. That commune had imposed perpetual residency on professors, made them civil servants, and intervened in the planning of degrees. The university students went on strike 1158 and took refuge in Padua and Siena until the commune came to its senses, according to them, and undertook never again to interfere in the planning, administration, and governance of the university. The battle for jurisdictional autonomy and academic freedom was also fierce at the University of Paris. In the year 1229, the court tried to take over the university. A lot of rancor happened. The royal police were involved and many were killed. There was a strike by students, and for 2 years, almost no courses were taught. Finally, in 1231, King Louis IX and Blanche of Castile recognized the independence of the university. Student strikes are not new. I apologize, some things have gone missing from my slide. Who knows, we move from one form of, what do we say? From one computer to another in one formatting. Let's see what we do have. Okay. Thank you. Well, we're not at the thank you yet, but it can be up there. I'm sorry, I had a number of videos to share with you, but they appear to be missing from the slide today. But I will speak to them. Today, universities play a key role in the delivery of education and training. They also provide knowledge, information, and evidence in policy practice and public debate. Through independent and academic inquiry and enabling informed public discourse, change can be brought about. Universities help strengthen democracy and protect human rights. They contribute to regional development and serve as hubs for cultural and civic engagement. Also today, universities are being fundamentally transformed, facing formidable external and internal pressures to focus research on what is deemed practical and economically beneficial. Instead of serving as society's institutions dedicated to the advancements of human knowledge, the education of students for all aspects of their current and future lives, and the preservation and transmission of our cultural and intellectual heritage, universities are being pressed to adopt a narrower mission, They are increasingly expected to be engines of growth, focusing on research that will pay off economically and that will resolve practical problems identified by governments, corporate partners, or funders, narrowing education to preparing students for the job market. Part of an increasingly pervasive framework of neoliberalism in which progress is seen to derive from individuals competing freely in international markets. Rankings, centers of excellence, citation matrices are really holding us in their tight grips. We must acknowledge the limitations of our context in Africa and globally. Reduced funding, large student bodies, inadequate infrastructures, reduced support from our governments, uncertain or unclear tenure and promotion systems, demoralizing work environments, and a lack of control over demanding workloads. We must also recognize a changing generation of students, changes in the languages, and I don't just mean the spoken languages, but the expressions, changes in communications and cultures, changing expectations of our students and our younger faculty. But within that context, our role as academics and the philosophical and ethical ideas of African cosmologies of human interconnectedness can still hold. They can be nurtured. By respecting individual humanness that has long sustained us, we can keep the spirit in the academy alive. We can activate it. We can practice our trade as academics that will inevitably force us to engage with questions of the possibilities of an improved version of the current world. In the final section, I look to popular culture and the autobiographical to suggest some answers to these questions. As we invest in our own curiosity, it becomes infectious for students because the monotony we experience as academics can take the joy out of our work. And inevitably, that lack of joy is communicated to our students, who then valorize education and knowledge merely as a means to an end. Teaching and research can create from gaps. Curiosity and yearning can be investigated. We can connect ourselves to our works. Feminists have long called this positionality. In all this, it is the individual with her or his own biography that is at the center of social action. When social actors engage in social actions through their agency, these actions, which are part of their biographies, inform their societies, which in turn influence those biographies again. So we have a creative pedagogy, and we get our students to engage through incorporating various forms of popular culture. We can use the classroom as a space for an inquiry-based dialogue between us as faculty members and students that encourages the students to develop new ways of understanding the mundane, everyday world in which they live. So we can be intentional. We can treat pieces of popular culture like song lyrics and music videos as valid academic texts. We are able to apply the sociological imagination to the world around us as an essential skill, and we can invite authors, civil society representatives, government officials for a discussion of the pros and cons, for example, of small-scale mining versus illegal mining. We can allow our students to build bridges between popular culture and all that stuff in our classrooms. We don't have to stop at synthesizing. The personal makes it real and memorable. I recall that when we were celebrating the University of Ghana at 75, we had a conversation here with the Popular Artists Manifest on the place of the arts in our academic inquiry. I'll refer to a few more projects before I bring my remarks to a close. The first one that I refer to is a research consortium led by Emerita Professor Techua Menu that was called Pathways of Women's Empowerment, Changing Representations of Women in Popular Culture Music. A subset was a project that I carried out with Professor Awo Asiedu, in which we looked at the ways in which musicians depict women and how that then is associated with constructions of, how people, their lived experiences in their own daily lives. We then held a workshop at one point to understand the musicians' conceptions of womanhood. And in that workshop, the musicians were invited to rethink some of their lyrics. subject of co-creation has also been, in this particular project, we also worked with a veteran musicologist, Professor John Collins. The musicians and radio presenters who attended the workshop included Jeduble Ambule, Mrs. Diana Hobson, One Love, The Kobolo, DJ Abu, Mr. Ni A. Dagadu, and Dennis Abiuku. This was held in 2008. The workshop was facilitated by a linguist, Professor Akosua Anyidoho from this university, and reflected on the messages encoded in popular Ghanaian song texts and brainstormed on alternative ways that women could be represented in popular songs. In 2019, I began a project with Professor Kate Skinner, then at the University of Birmingham, on archives of women's activism, and we eventually created a film called When Women Speak, which traces the stories of 16 Ghanaian women who came of age in the 1960s and 70s. It follows their experiences as told in their own words as Ghana passed through periods of military, single-party, and multi-party rule. These women were prominent in public life, in the law, the media, academia, politics, and various governmental and non-governmental organizations for women. Their stories tell us about the issues around which women mobilized and their modes of activism and advocacy at home and abroad during some of the years when a lot of writings on Ghana's history were not being carried out. Their words challenge the popular perception that gender activism is a foreign import which came from the so-called West and found its way to Ghana with the restoration of multi-party democracy in 1992. In other words, their words show us that this was a long-standing project. The project was also a collaboration with many young people, listening to their voices or allowing the official teachers, in other words, we the senior academics, to be taught by our students. The director for the film was one of my PhD students. Research was conceptually co-created with an academic, technical, and artistic team of different generations of people. Ghanaian hip-life music has produced a number of artists, some themselves with university degrees in the social sciences and humanities, who provide serious commentary on contemporary social concerns. Clark, in 2012, has written on hip-hop as social commentary in Accra and Dar es Salaam, and Reggie Rockstone is generally acknowledged in this work as the father of hip life, and both he and One Love, the Kobolo, have songs that speak eloquently and realistically to the migrant experiences in the US. Manifest in his song Safa notes, and I quote him, "If your name is Mohammed or Mustafa, flying may be harder. My sympathies, brother." In another song, "If you don't love me, let me go," Reggie Rockstone places the painful issue of domestic violence squarely in the public domain. In his songs for Kukwa, a young man, Papa Mensah, a college student at the time, sings an ode to his motherland in which he upends the sometimes schizophrenic relationship that today's Afropolitan youth have with their countries of origin. And I have used many of these songs and the accompanying videos in my classroom. You should have been seeing a music video now by Miss Bell on a song she called 16 Years. It was released in March 2005 and depicts a middle-aged man who tries to pursue a 16-year-old girl. In the video, she plays the role of the 16-year-old girl. Gender, sexual discovery, rape culture, and shaming all come out in the video as we see this man try to have his way with a young woman, but eventually he is taken to court and shamed and I suppose sent to jail. It is interesting that after performing on the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science Technology campus in celebration of one of their hall weeks, Ms. Bell was sexually assaulted by a group from the audience members after a riot broke out because she refused to play additional music and as the Germans would say, Zugabe. In a radio interview where she was accused because she was not properly dressed, she defended herself by stating, "I cannot be blamed for my own assault." This is a music video that we have used both for teaching on sexual assault, on sexual cultures, and for training on sexual abuse and rights. The next video that you should have seen is on Mansa Musa. Mansa Musa is a popular production by Chief Mumin that tells the story of Mansa Musa, the great king. This has been a product long in the making. It's a musical, it's wonderful. I am sorry that you are really sorry that you are not seeing the video. And its first showing was in 2018. It has so far shown in 9 international festivals in 6 countries: Egypt, Bahamas, Geneva, Algeria, Nigeria, Barbados, and of course Ghana. It had its first international show in Paris at the UNESCO headquarters with a cast of 60 crew and musicians, and it is planning an extensive tour next year to the US, UK, China, amongst others. The last slide that you would have seen, and this should hopefully be my last apology, is from the work of Professor Joseph Odro-Frimpong, who currently directs the Center for African Popular Culture at Ashesi University. He works on political cartoons, satirical visual works, especially those produced by the artist Bright Akwe, and he uses the dynamic features of humorous critique to allow political researchers to gain a more holistic understanding of politics on the ground. These works are a visual archive of Ghana's history that can be critically analyzed to enhance our understanding of Ghanaian post-colonial culture. Their pedagogical potential is demonstrated in the classroom, where they may be used to clarify, challenge, and ground theoretical concepts, thereby contributing to efforts, for example, to de-Westernize or decolonize contemporary university teaching. In 2017, the then ambassador to Ghana, San Bohang, attended a Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology end-of-year exhibition titled Horn Elves in Accra. During her exhibition tour, the ambassador visited the allotted space of Bright Akwe, this young and well-respected Ghanaian visual satirist. Within this space, Ambassador Boahang specifically had her picture taken standing next to Akwe's latest satirical piece titled Them Threaten. In that piece, what you see is a number of Nigerian officials captured large and a number of Ghanaian officials captured small. And Akwe is trying to satirize the role of Chinese in the illegal gold mining industry in Ghana. What is intriguing about Madame Huang's photo-taking opportunities is that the work visually satirized one of her own prior actions. She is in that cartoon. This act relates to Huang's subtly domineering posturing through an open letter to the government of Ghana. In that communication, she complained about, and I'm quoting Odro-Frimpong's work here, a number of distorted or biased reports and stories on Chinese people, especially some reports and cartoons that are defaming Chinese leaders and senior officials. Unquote. The note came soon after Akwe's work titled We Dey Beg, another cartoon on illegal mining. A critically acclaimed piece went viral in Ghana and beyond. The ambassador's letter ended with what can be considered a veiled warning in view of China's global superpower status compared to Ghana. And I quote again from that letter: the Chinese side is very concerned about this unhealthy tendency. We hope that the Ghanaian government will pay due attention to this situation, take the necessary action to stop such things from happening again, and guide the media to give an objective coverage on the issue so as to create a good environment for further development of our bilateral exchanges and cooperation. Unquote. The above anecdote shows how a key Ghana-China geopolitical issue was debated in everyday life through popular visual satirical media and used in the classroom to discuss geopolitical issues as well as the struggles with the illegal mining industry. I will conclude here as I look at time and hope that my imaginings and the absence of the visuals and the sound nonetheless have allowed my exhortations around a more communal space of mutual learning and co-creation to allow us to engage in further conversations. And I thank you very much.
Please, another round of applause. Thank you very much, Prof, for the very insightful lecture. I mean, if you don't know her, you might think she's also a philosopher, and discussing not only Amo, but J.G. Redu and other prominent philosophers. Thank you very much. So we'll have time for a few questions, but let me first acknowledge the presence of Professor Adai Mensah, former Vice Chancellor of the University of Ghana. We also have in our midst our Pro-Vice Chancellor for Students and Academic Affairs, Professor Gordon Awandari, in our midst. We also have the members of the Ghana Academy. I see a few of them. If you can just wave. Thank you very much for gracing the occasion. We also have registrars and deans and directors around. If you can also just wave. I see one. Thank you very much. So we don't have much time, but we want to give the opportunity for just a few quick, short questions. If there are any questions. When the lecture is so insightful and covers every point, then you probably don't have any questions, which is okay. But if there are any pressing questions, okay.
Thank you very much for the very refreshing lecture, Professor. I'm just, and maybe if she can't answer, maybe one of those of you in Miasa can. I mean, what if Amu was a little bit older? Might he have been a little bit older? That's my question. I'm asking whether when Amu was captured, whether he was a little bit older, whether he might have been a little bit older, given the possible retentions that he seemed to have had from his own culture. Thank you.
I haven't done all that much Amu research, but from what I've read, Stephen Pepper is here, so he can. But from what I have read and from the research that people have done, they have put his age in that category of between 4, 5, maybe 6, but certainly under the age of 10. But Pepper is welcome to tell us more. He has been engaging with Amu's work for a long time.
Thank you. This is taking me by surprise, but I'll try. Well, so the written records suggest that his date is 4 years. That is a current consensus. Other than that, we don't have any other alternative view. So I doubt, and I'm a little bit skeptical about the retention of his African heritage or whatever, but that may be a discussion that we may have later on. But for the age, it is 4 years. As of now, we don't have any consensus. We don't have any other alternative view. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we take the next question.
Yeah, just wondering.
If it's possible to state your name and maybe your designation and yeah.
Yeah, Professor Bonyo. So generally, it is said that no one teaches the child about God. Innately, the child will get to know God. So the idea of Jinyami that seems to have had definitely would have been something God himself would have implanted in him. And he will have developed that. That is my thought. Now, I'm wondering where a lot of the composers, and I want to, being a never, I want to, Anaklo for that matter, I want to mention Apalu, who has composed a lot of philosophical songs. And when we are talking about these being therapeutic, many of those, the lyrics of those songs that I heard, indeed minister to the soul. I'm wondering where these composers, their songs, and also, say, the wisdom books for those of us who happen to be ministers, the use of that, the words, the scriptures, how do they factor even now when we are talking about or asking the question, where are the intellectuals, the where are the therapeutic intellectuals? How do this factor into that?
Thank you very much for that. The Germans would say, da bin ich überfragt. I don't work in music, and I know the therapeutic potential of music, but what I would say from where I sit in the work that I do is to use music not in the psychological way that musicians use music for healing, but the lyrics and the message of the song to deal with the challenges of our contemporary time, right? So let's say we can look at the environmental issues of illegal mining, of migration issues, of border controls, of sexual violence, of the genocide in Gaza and so on. There are songs that deal with those issues, and using those songs in the learning and research place allows us to engage with those topics in ways that are more freeing, because we can engage with the songs, you can enter into the songs or films or whatever it is in ways that sometimes the written word doesn't quite achieve, because it's like a little bit more removed. But when you hear the person's voice, if you see images, it's much easier for you to enter into that conversation and to have discussions, do your research in ways that allows you to feel that you're actually you're doing something, you're contributing, you're being heard. But again, I will be fair, I'm not seeing any musicians around here. We know that music in and of itself is therapeutic, but I'm referring to using it in a more, engaging more with the text and the sound and the visuals to allow for conversation. So, it's an additional form of sort of intellectual, allowing you to sort of breathe and to find a place of rest and peace in spite of the chaos and the angst.
And I'm just playing to part of the question and the answer. Okay. There is first of all, thank you for the lecture. And I was sitting here thinking we are a day late and $1 short. And because essentially you're saying, can we get away from European essentialism and epistemology when we think of knowledge and how we transmit knowledge? And I'm thinking, how do we take this to first a primary school? And then in terms of music and the therapy that comes with it as a quasi-musician, the sense in which it's not just the lyrics and the music, but the cadence, the rhythm. So how is our curriculum structured so that it has the kind of cadence and rhythm that brings the ups and downs and the therapy that we can experience in the classroom? Or are we just doing the go, 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 and we have a rubric for grading? You know, how are we teaching? How are we grading? Is creativity part of all of this? And I think that music, you know, plays a big part. If you even think of your lecture as music, cadence will give us that therapeutic moment that we want. So I'm still trying to figure out how we get it to primary school.
And I think I mean, this is a comment, and so long as we are not singing in the bleak midwinter.
Thank you, Professor, for this lecture. Very insightful. My question involves popular culture. In current popular culture, we find that the most popular music depicts, even more so than in previous times, acutely sexualized content. Is it the case that that is the most expected? That is it the case that is the market value, the market value that the public wants the most, or is it that attempts by intellectuals to publicly educate the public has proven futile?
Well, I have to reflect a bit on that. When we did the project on women's empowerment, and we engaged with musicians, you know, this was part of the conversations that we had, the sexualized nature, and the songs about women. It wasn't only the sexualized nature, it was women were witches. If your marriage wasn't working, it was your mother-in-law who had put something in the soup. You know, a lot of the songs that we analyzed had very negative representations of women. There were also positive representations of women, and we collected these. We worked with Professor John Collins to get a really cross-sectional collection of songs. I will say many of the musicians who worked with us were self-selected in the sense that they were already interested in destabilizing, doing the kind of thing that you are talking about. But we know that the capitalist world, money, you know, if you do what the people who are paying want you to do, and sex sells, let's be honest, you know, sex sells. So if you, the more sexualized it can be, the more money that you're getting. We know that there are genres of music that are not as sexualized as some of the popular music. So for us at the time, it was a conversation with musicians. They agreed to work with their colleagues, but it's not a project that those of us in the academy can say, okay, we are going to make our own music. Because first of all, we're not musicians necessarily, all of us, and we don't have the money to do so. But we use this kind of project to engage with our students so that some of them who become musicians can also reflect differently, so that we can use music, both those that are sexualized and those that are not, as teaching tools of how to do things and how not to do things. And you know, as points of critique, so that you can watch the music and not just see it as normal. And then in your own conversations and your own spaces of work and so on, it's work for the long durée, right? And I don't want to say that, well, that's how the music industry is. So, well, that's why we engage with these projects, so that some of us can, you know, make a little bit of difference. And you notice that many of the names that I mentioned, not all of them, do not necessarily objectify women in their music videos. So there are people who do things differently. Are you a musician?
Let's take the last question.
Oh, yeah. Like the last question.
Or then I'll read the online one.
Oh, okay, perfect. So, Divine Fu also has a question online. Can I read his question or?
Okay.
Okay, and I also have my own question. So he says, Divine Fu at UCT, the director of HUMA, why is it so important to claim and demonstrate that universities, a form of knowledge organization born in Europe at a particularly toxic time, started or existed in Africa before? Doesn't it prevent us from allowing other forms of knowledge engagement? Aren't we centering the European form as the one and only and most important by insisting that it either existed or started here? Is it possible that it was something else more generative? And then I just have like a 1 second question. Thank you very much for the lecture. It was so many things inside. But one thing that stuck out to me was Du Bois's double consciousness, right? And this notion that Amu was moving in between two worlds, particularly as an academic, and Du Bois's double consciousness really can be explained in his movements, right? And so I'm wondering in the academy today, particularly with the commercialization, the overcapitalization of education, and really this notion that international education is premier, are we also as academics and students not navigating through our own sense of double consciousness? And if so, how do you suggest that we use Amu's example in order to push back or develop a different sense, a different education system so that we are not constantly battling a double consciousness? Thank you.
Ooh, I think that your question and Divine's question, and thank you for all the questions so far. Your questions are kind of linked, because if we think of we have a university, we have universities in Africa rather than African universities, right? Because these are European creations that we have inherited, colonialism and all of that. In an ideal world, we would be doing Sankofa for our own universities, but this is where we are today, and we inhabit them. We can either work with them, and I think that when Nkrumah established the Institute of African Studies in this university, he was being a pragmatist and finding that space to walk the tightrope between the double consciousness and saying, okay, this is a space, as he charged us, where we would, research and teach Africa in African-centered ways, because he recognized that in many of the departments, the disciplines were still being taught in Eurocentric ways. So it was a compromise. I think that the contemporary university is a compromise, and we have to work with it and constantly disrupt where we can. So when we're working with partners, when we're dealing with issues of publications, citations, and so on, we constantly are insisting on different ways that, of doing things, of recognition, and so on, that are, every day it's a new struggle, but the alternative is to say, you know what, I'm done with this place. It really isn't what it should be, and so I'm leaving to go elsewhere. I personally feel like it's a space that we have. We have used it for many good things. There have been scientists here who have done amazing work. Professor Wandari is here. Professor Adai is here. They worked on malaria, on COVID, and what, from African-centered ways. I use Prof. Wandari's inaugural lecture slides anytime I'm talking about decolonizing, because he helped us to understand the way COVID was working here. We have a space, and we must do with it what it is. And I'm sure that Divine agrees with me. That's why he's still at the University of Cape Town. And, we soldier on. Unfortunately, the double consciousness is something that we straddle with. And I think when we talk about the fact that Africans and African-descended people have always dealt with this turbulence, have built these skills, sometimes we're exhausted. Why do we have to constantly do that work? It's a legacy. It's an uncomfortable and painful legacy that has been dropped on us. And each new day, we do some more destabilizing. And sometimes it's a few steps forward and some steps back.
Okay, so the final question online is about psychotherapy and where you think that falls or relates to this in terms of the therapeutic dynamics of autobiographies. Do you see psychotherapy being related to it?
I believe in therapy. And I think that we live in a moment when therapy is important. How to bring that into the I mean, you may have students and fellow faculty who need some therapy, but if you're not a professional, you shouldn't be attempting to do any therapy in the classroom. You need to recognize if somebody needs professional help and recommend them to a professional to assist them, is what I can say.
Thank you very much, Professor Adobako Ampofo. We'll now take the final remarks from the chairperson for today's lecture, that is the Provost of the College of Humanities, to give her final closing remarks. And afterwards, we'll take the vote of thanks and then the university anthem, and there will be the recession. So, Prof. Chair.
So this was a real eye-opening lecture building on the previous ones, and we thank Prof. Akosua Ampofo very much for once again reminding us of who Amu was, what he represented, and how we live, or we can use that in today's world. So as you all anticipated, whilst coming here, we have gained some new knowledge. We have new ideas as to how we can bring back a century-old philosophy, which is still well alive in us today. And as we know, through the lens of the African philosophical traditions and in the conversation with both classical and contemporary thinkers, as my head of philosophy here, including voices from popular culture, which can be confusing, as my friend indicated in his question on representation of women, and the nurturing of human interconnectedness, Professor Adobako Ampofo emphasized by articulating the visions of hope and justice. And as we all agree, these are shared across generations, disciplines, and publics. Therefore, on behalf of MIASA, Institute of African Studies, Department of Philosophy and Classics, I wish to thank our speaker and to thank all of you. And I hope we have been challenged enormously and inspired and encouraged to continue this vital conversation. I wish you all, it's not yet Christmas, but I wish you all Merry Christmas, since we might not meet before then. Enjoy the rest of the evening.
Thank you. So we'll now call upon Dr. Chika Emba, a senior research fellow at the Institute of African Studies, to give us the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Richmond. I'm sure that mine is the easiest and perhaps the most enjoyable part of the evening. To thank on behalf of the Marian Institute for Advanced Studies in Africa, the Institute of African Studies, and the Department of Philosophy and Classics. Thank everyone who has been able to make time to attend this particular AMU lecture, both online and offline, at a time that perhaps people are thinking of holidaying, and then You created time. It must be a sign of commitment. Special thanks to our invited speaker, Professor Akosua Adumoka. She's a professor's professor, always willing and able to take up an intellectual challenge. And Prof, we are very grateful that we are able to make this. And of course, also thanking her beautiful family, who are now the College of Humanities Provost, Professor Joseph Yaro. He's never present. I think this should be the third or the fourth time that he made time to be fully present at the AMU lecture. Provost, thank you so much. The German Embassy in Accra, special thanks to the Deputy Head of Mission, Ms. Sivian Janssen. She was present but had to leave because of other pressing engagement. The Institute of African Studies Director, Professor Samuel Tewushu. And I was supposed to also thank myself for working with the Director of the Institute of African Studies, who's been very supportive of this particular AMU lectures, to my knowledge. Thank you, Director, and also for being fully present, not just in this one, but several other AMU lectures. This is the 5th iteration of the AMU lectures. And then, of course, the Department of, the Head of the Department of Philosophy, Dr. Richmond Kwesi, who is MC, Head of Department, thank you for your time and for always being ever present at the AMU lectures. And also to thank the MEASA team for organizing this particular lecture, for doing those backroom services and work. Dr. Agnes Schneider-Musha, Mr. George Ambektra, and Ms. Mary Ametepe, and their team of assistants for such a well-organized program. And of course, my ELSA fellows, I can see Professor Kusimi, is that Lamin Dumbia, and so many other, my ELSA fellows. Thank you for coming. Invited guests, including those who couldn't make it in person but are there online. Several of my colleagues here from the Institute of African Studies, thank you for making time to come. The Ghana Dance Ensemble, students of University of Ghana and the Islamic University, and of course the ever supportive Public Affairs Directorate. Can't remember the number of times we found ourselves in a difficult situation while organizing this event. Some other events and people from Public Affairs just made things look rather easy. Thank you, Public Affairs, and of course the media personalities, representatives that are here. Thank you so much for gracing and reporting on another AMU lecture. We thank everyone once again for creating the time to join the AMU lecture this year. We look forward to welcoming you again to another such event by the Marian Institute of Advanced Studies in Africa, perhaps in collaboration with the current collaborators. Thank you so much. Have a good night.
Thank you. So we have prepared some refreshments on my left. That when we recess, we'll go there and interact with the guest speaker and other members of the master team. So we'll rise up for the university anthem, and after the anthem, the Ghana Dance Ensemble will usher the high table, the podium, the guest speaker and the invited guests. So remain standing, and then after they depart, we can all go. So if the audio visual can help us with the UG anthem. Ghana dance. My phone.
They will record it.
Oh, okay.